Are you hungry but only have 30 minutes to meal prep? Then download my new e-cookbook, What to Meal Prep, at successfitnessstore.com. You will get 3 step-by-step written and visual recipes for one high-protein meal that's under 600 calories. I'll help you cook fresh salmon, steam fresh broccoli, and quinoa in under 30 minutes to help you stay on track of your fitness goals. So go to successfitnessstore.com to download your copy today. Welcome to the Success Fitness Podcast. I am your host, Christian Evans. This podcast is about helping improve our relationship with nutrition and exercise to achieve success in our fitness journey. And today's special guest, boxing coach and gym owner, Keppner, will help us do just that by sharing the pros and cons of boxing for women and men, being diagnosed with Lyme disease at 17, to bulking for powerlifting and losing 50 pounds. Without further ado, Success Fitness family, please welcome Keppner to the podcast. How are you today?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Appreciate you having me.
Awesome to have you. Awesome to have you. And you are in Athens, Georgia, correct?
That's right. The South.
What's the weather like today?
It's a little stormy and cloudy from that hurricane.
I got you. So you all get some of that after effect.
A little bit. It goes through the inland, or whatever. So
I got you. So you got a little bit of cool weather, but it's still just rainy then, right?
Yeah, we're just about to get the rain.
Okay. Are they calling for big storms or little storm or?
It might, man. A couple of years back, we had a hurricane, that big one that hit, and we definitely got some of the actual storm part. But I don't know. You never know until you know.
Yeah, I got you. So tell us a little backstory on what motivated you to just start your overall fitness journey.
Yeah, so I grew up, being into art and music and film and things like that, because my mom's an artist, and never really had any interest in any of it. My father had both my sister and I said that you're going to have to do something physical, and if you don't pick something, I'll pick it for you. So for him, being a boxing coach, he picked for us to do some type of martial art. So my sister and I did a little bit of that, but we fought it tooth and nail and never really had an interest in it. And it wasn't until, as you mentioned in the beginning, I got Lyme disease that, I was like 125 pounds at like 5'8" or so, super weak, super skinny. And, when you're 15, 16 years old or so, man, you want to start becoming a man. And I didn't feel like that. So that's where the field of diamonds in my own backyard was boxing. So at that time, we're talking early 2000s, a lot of people were getting famous with MMA. So like Forrest Griffin, a couple other people were coming out of Athens, Georgia, the hardcore gym. And so I saw their success in combat sports. And I was like, oh, that's the antithesis of being, the opposite of what I was. So
I got you. So being diagnosed with Lyme disease, can you go a little further into that? What is that? How does that affect your body?
Yeah,
and
that's
are you still dealing with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the jury is out on whether there is such a thing as chronic Lyme or not. There's a lot of debate still, I believe. And at the time that I got a positive blood test, the CDC did not recognize it in Georgia at that time. It's pretty well accepted up north, but they didn't think that ticks got down this far for that disease. So anyway, it's a spirochete. So it's very similar. It's not an STD, but it's very similar to syphilis. So if you know about all the wonderful things that syphilis can do to someone, it can literally drive you insane. It affects all your joints and your whole central nervous system and everything. So as far as symptomatically, that's what makes it hard to diagnose, is because you have sometimes every symptom in the book, from muscle spasms, joint pain, to fatigue, to fogginess, to sometimes pure psychological. Like, say for me, it was anxiety attacks, really depression and energy first, and then it slowly started manifesting itself more physically with joint pain and sleeping 18 hours a day and things like that, and no short-term memory, things like that.
I got you. So how do you deal with that even to this day?
Yeah, well, so that was a course of me going through a lot of treatment with antibiotics and everything else, and then also, getting my health right, and then also having to learn how to define myself not as a sick person. And so it's like, whether or not Lyme is still something that does affect me or not, what's important is how I react to all of that and how I structure my life. And so I work my butt off all the time, because I own actually own 2 facilities, but we have a franchise business. And so I'm busy a lot, working hard, and a lot of stress. And so it's all about how you manage that stress. And like you and I were talking about before, right? Exercise is key to getting the most out of your life and also dealing with stress.
Correct. Like you talked about, well, it's pretty much just like you said, it's when you're trying to deal with stress, it's you have to find a happy medium,
Right.
something that's going to have a positive outlook, because you can't go raging, on your
That's
significant
right.
other or the public, because you can, cause a lot of damage.
Right.
There's been plenty of times when, something just goes horrible. And the only thing I can think of is just going to my basement where I have my gym at and just working out.
Right.
I think I can't remember what that movie name, what the name of that movie is, as Mark Wahlberg and The Rock. And I think it's a movie about them like peddling drugs out of a, gym or whatever, steroids or whatever. And there's a scene where Mark Wahlberg ends up getting into this argument. He was a hothead, getting into this argument with this guy, bust him over the head with a dumbbell, right? And killed him. And in that moment, he's like panicking. And the only thing he could think of was just like grabbing some dumbbells and just curling. And like The Rock just goes right into like instant spotter mode, instant motivation. It's like, yeah, you got it. You got it. And like I always think about that mode. Like every time I'm angry, it's like I need to go right there, because that's exactly how I feel. You can't think of anything else what to do or how to deal with
Right.
that stress. It's, you're working out if those tools are available to you. Now, you mentioned you had got injured after, thinking about powerlifting and strongman. You had bulked up to from 160 to 220. And then you said you realized it was horrible. So what was horrible about that experience, and how did you lose that 50 pounds to drop down to about
So that, yeah,
170?
it's good. It's more about how did I gain that 50
I got
pounds, right?
okay. Yep, go both of
But
them, both of
it's
them.
all together. So,
Yeah.
and this is something actually I was just preaching to some of our boxers, competitive boxers, is that it's easy when you're particularly male and when you're not the tallest guy that, you can't get taller, you want to get wider, right? And you think that that's, again, going to be what's going to make you feel better about yourself. And like, one or two parts, right, is that, the ladies don't really like big, bulky guys anyway. But also, it's all about what you got in here and in here that is the most important thing. So the whole time I boxed, for the majority of it, I was about 100 and maybe 40 to 150, and then I got to about 160. But I was lifting too much with weights, trying to gain muscle because I want to be bigger. And in boxing, that's not a good idea. If anything, you want to be a little bit lighter than what you walk around at, because everyone else is a little bit heavier than you. So if I was boxing 165, guys were coming down from 175, right, or 180 is where they start at before they start boxing, versus me coming up. So there's a power differential there. Anyway, so there was that element. Then I finally got it through my skull to stop trying to bulk up and gain muscle while I was boxing and focus on just boxing and becoming a badass instead of trying to look like a badass. And then I got injured, neck injury, when I was in Mexico boxing, and had to stop. And at that point, I was like, okay, game on. Now I'm going to get as big as I can be. And that's where I was like, okay, maybe I want to get a strongman or powerlifter or something like that, because it would be something that wouldn't affect my neck. And so I got up to about 220 or so. My goal is to get to 250. And I maybe got just a tad over 220, and I was literally eating to the point of throwing up. Now, the one thing is important as well is that always get your blood work done, right? I'm sure that's something with people you work with and a lot of people we talk to, right?
Definite.
So along with my neck injury, around that same time, I started having thyroid issues and challenges. And so I got my blood work done with that, because, my body was just soft. Like no matter what was happening, like my body was just like soft. So once I got that right as well, that helped. And then it also helped me to get the weight off when I finally got there. But the thing is, when I got there to the 220 mark, right? I'm 5'8". I'm not built to be 220. I'm like 170. I feel good right now. And so, God, you just had to roll out of bed, and you're not athletic at all. Yeah. And that's where it's good to have that good balance of athleticism and some strength. But man, really, to me, I don't know what you experienced. To me, so I started running half marathons and things like that. Because, and I was someone that said I would never run more than 2 miles. And I found that was actually something better for my health, but also it helped give me more endurance and lasting power for the real race, which is, me growing a business and everything else. And it's something that I found when I was pounding the weights, at least for me, and having the illness that, I had or do have, it was really slamming my adrenals and things like that. And so I found that more of the lighter weight, higher repetition type stuff, as well as doing the more of the running and more endurance type stuff, it's all the good blood flow. It helps, with the immune function, everything else. And also too, man, aerobic exercise, I mean, you probably know this, but it creates neurogenesis, so creation of new neurons. And that's something that, as I get older, I don't want to get duller. I want to get sharper.
Right. Because those intervals, like I particularly train my clients with more of a hit style interval training, right? Where I can pick anywhere between 3 to 6 exercises in under 8 minutes. And just keeping rotation, keeping rotating. And, let's say we go from a dumbbell shoulder press to, let's say, a kettlebell squat. And that's a whole different recruiting of how you breathe, what I mean, and how you respond, because it's only like 10 seconds to get to the next station. And we go from, let's say, bicep curls to tricep kickbacks. You put all 4 of those in, and it's just that rotation. And, I was kind of leery of it when I first started doing it compared to, your typical 5x5, 3 sets of 10 or whatever the case may be of benching. It's like, no, we're doing all of this. And I'm like, what? So even I started getting involved into it because, I want to make sure I do the exercises that I'm telling my clients to do. And it's a whole different feeling. So you all listening, if you haven't tried what Coach Keith is talking about, HIIT training, interval style, you have to do it. You'll love it. You'll love it. But keep going.
No, exactly. It's also more entertaining, like you said, too. And then also, too, it's all about what you're training for. So it's something that I realized with my own self, as well as with fighters that I train, things like that, is that, the whole idea of periodization, right? Because when you're young, you're like, okay, I want to lift weights, so therefore I'm going to lift heavy, and I'm just going to lift heavier and hevier and heavier. It doesn't work like that. You end up just burning out, maxing out. Same thing with running or anything, including boxing as well. So I'll have to help my athletes understand. I had to understand this for myself, that there's seasons, right? And even if your sport doesn't have a season, right? You got to just adjust for it. Sometimes you need to kind of dial it back and do a little bit more aerobic style training. Sometimes you ramp it up with more explosive. But for instance, like how I was brought along with my father as a coach, he was old school, but he's also specific in his own way. He wanted to create the most explosive, powerful fighter he could produce. So therefore, I was always doing plyometrics and very, very joint intensive and challenging things. And man, it was tough for my joints. I never got a chance to just get the blood flow going and things like that.
I got you. So being that I introduced you as Coach Keith and gym owner, and before we get into how you got into boxing, you just briefly mentioned it. Go ahead and tell everybody what your business is and where you coach at. Explain a little bit more about your business.
Yeah. So I started the business essentially with who would be my future wife and I back in 2013, Keppner Boxing and Fitness. And I started off more with the mindset of like, I want to produce world champions. But then quickly, like my wife helped me understand, in order to be able to do that, you also need to earn a living, right? And like so many coaches, they'll work a day job and then go to the gym at night. It's like, well, I want to get all that together. And so she's like, let's build the business in a way that it can support your hobby, which is fighters. And I found actually a true love for working with general public people and, people of many different situations and conditions versus just only fighters. And that's what really grew our model. And then, fast forward about almost 10 years now later, we stepped out of our business basically completely. So I could do a little bit of coaching with our competitive athletes at our location in Athens, but that's about it. Everything else is run and systematized. And that's how we knew we had something that was replicatable. So then we started offering franchises back in 2020. So about 24 months ago. And because I not only have a passion for coaching boxing, I also have a passion for coaching business, because along that journey, I got a real passion for that aspect, because, boxing and fitness and everything else and business, it's not the end goal. It's just the medium that you are existing in to do what? To grow yourself, to challenge yourself, to make yourself better.
Right.
And because also too, man, the time is going to pass anyway, right? So it's like, you're going to have 10 years pass by anyway. How about you do something nice with it, even if it takes 10 years to get somewhere, right?
Right.
And so that's really my journey and our journey. And then along that pathway, when I started coaching, I was probably about 190 at that time. And then slowly, like kind of what you were alluding to with the HIIT stuff, I was like, man, I need to live what I preach a little bit more. And so, that's what made me make sure I stayed on top of everything. And also, to have that diverse experience as a coach is so important as well. I've done everything from a half marathon to, deadlifting like almost 500 pounds. So it's like, I've done a good gamut as well as fought, so it's like, I have a good repertoire to relate to somebody on.
A gambit. You got the whole thing going.
Right.
Business owner, coach. What were some of the toughest obstacles when it comes to running your business? I face them all the time. I'm an independent personal trainer, and
right.
You go through those slow seasons. In particular, summertime, people are going on vacation. Your clients are going on vacation, so you got slots to fill, and that is just so tough in the midst of, hey, I got to get my workout on, too. But it's like, do I spend this time, working out or trying to either gain a client or do a side hustle,
Right.
to, make the ends meet. So how do you balance all that out?
That's a great question. Well, so, nowadays, the franchise is a whole nother business, a whole nother animal. But so it was funny. So I got really hardcore into running right when I stepped out of my location before we really got going on the franchise. And then I was like hitting all these PRs and just like crushing all these times. And then all of a sudden, we launched this whole other business, which is the franchise part. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, like my PRs start lagging, things like that. And that's where you have to make those hard decisions, right? About touching on seasons, right? The seasons of life, where it's like, okay, this season of life, it's like I told all my running buddies, everything else, is that I'm focused on being a champion at one thing. Because it's like, just like if you're a fighter or anything else, Mayweather, he wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a champion entrepreneur and a champion pro boxer. First, he did the pro boxer thing and got successful with that. Then he stemmed off in the business. So the same thing goes for anybody with anything they do. So that's where I was like, okay, hold up. I'm not going to be the top 10 runner in my community, which was my goal. I'm going to focus on the main goal, which is the franchise thing. But to answer your question directly is, so therefore the focus is on just micro, right? Little wins every day, which means just move a little bit every darn day. Because, the problem is we all want to have the most, especially when you're a coach, right? You want to have the most elegant workout. You want to have everything perfect. And also some of us too, is like, I was talking to one of our fighters yesterday. He's like, man, I feel like if I don't train hard, it's not worth it. I'm like, not Christian, it's worth it. It's worth it. Just showing up. And something that really helped me with that psychologically is just don't break the chain, right? So it's like you're making a chain of actions, and if you miss one day, that's fine. Don't beat yourself up, but make sure you don't break it. Come back the next day and just build up another chain of those positive days and habits. But with the challenge with business, though, that's a big question, Christian, right? Because it's when does it ever end? It never ends, and thank God, because it'd be boring, right? But I would say first off, the thing is besides learning the tactical things that you need to know, like marketing or sales, and also how to define your service or product in a fashion that people actually want to consume, right? So those three things. Then there's the whole thing of stepping aside, or being willing to step aside and not be the most important person anymore, in every aspect.
Right.
Because you got to like step aside and realize, like, it's the biggest thing I see people get challenged by, especially when they start their own business, is they think that they do what they do so good that no one else could do it. And that's not a bad place to start, but it's not a bad place to be after a while, because then you can never outsource your roles. Like, I'll give you an example. So this one guy owns a couple gyms, and he does pretty well for himself, but man, he's like still booking appointments. He's still calling leads and booking appointments himself. And it's like, man, that's something we outsourced a long time ago, and we have a department that does that for us.
Right.
And so it's like, man, that's the lowest skilled part of the whole funnel. Like, yeah, the training part, that's more complex. Selling people, that's more complex. And retaining them and serving them and helping them hit their goals year after year, that's more complex. But dude, just freaking calling you up and being like, hey, this time or this time, which one works best for you? That type of thing. It's like, that doesn't take a lot of skill, but he was not even willing to outsource that because he felt like, oh, well, they won't be able to do it as well as I can. Well, that's okay. Like, you got to accept that and train them to get to that level. So
it's that delegation part. Right. And you mentioned something that, it hit it close to home, because I'm like right at that point, right? To where it's just like, okay, I need to start outsourcing, whether it's editing videos or, even something as simple as, making phone calls, or somebody just holding the camera for me to record, and you see how important that is. I listen to a ton of, business strategies, podcasts and different things like that. And that is one of the main things. So two things they always say is build your brand through storytelling, the art of storytelling, and being able to outsource. And where the fear comes in at is because people don't write your steps down. So even by me doing, say, post podcast, when I'm done with this podcast, I have a list, a check off list, to where if my 13-year-old niece could come in and she could follow that step by step written, you know what I mean? And you start to see, it's like, that's a whole process, but people are afraid to make that first step in, like you just said, as far as making those chains, make them all connect. But, it's fun to go on the journey of it, but it's like, okay, once I can get this time free, then I can do, something, more, either work in the business or work on the business, or, wherever you choose. But yeah, that delegation and being able to just spread your knowledge. And it helps you build that character of coaching too. And the same, because they're going to make a mistake. They're not going to do everything that how you exactly did it, because you don't do everything exactly in the time of your life, because we're always changing stuff. It's like, oh, let me change that. Let me change that. Let me change this. So getting back to, as far as boxing, you had briefly mentioned your father had trained you. Is this how you got into boxing? Can you go into a little bit more about him and his history?
No, absolutely. So that's where we get to Illinois, right? So which is where you are. So my father boxed in the CYO, Catholic Youth Organization in Chicago, and his coach was Chuck Bodak and Tony Zale. Tony Zale was two-time middleweight world champion. He's from Gary, Indiana originally. And so Bodak was his coach as a fighter. He had about 30 amateur fights and fought in like the city tournament and things like that. So had some pretty good amateur experience. And then he also mentored under Chuck as a coach. And that's where it's so important, to have someone to mentor under, whether it's, business, fitness, or coaching or anything. And Chuck, something about Bodak, is that he was actually the Olympic coach for Cassius Clay, who of course gone to be Muhammad Ali. And so he's worked with he's no longer with us, obviously, but he worked with over 50 world champions. So my father learned that lineage of coaching, which is from the 20s and 30s. And carried that on to coaching fighters who fought on national television and produced multiple Golden Glove champions, and then, passed that on to me, because with myself, I was sick as heck. So I dropped out of high school. And so my school was boxing at about, 16, 17. And I spent, about 4 or 5 years of my life doing nothing but boxing and learning about boxing, the history of boxing and everything. And got a lot of great lessons along that way.
Good. No other better teacher than, your father, and taught you, like you said, some tough lessons from that plyo training, and it's like, man, those joints are beat up, but he was trying to train you to be one of the most explosive and, powerful, some boxers. So with that being said, what are some of the pros and cons for boxing for women?
Yeah, great question. The pros of it is that, think about it. It's stereotypical, but it is true. I can tell you from working with thousands of people, it is true that females do tend to focus on their lower body and males tend to focus on their upper body. And also as well, like just generally, like we talk about more aerobic style exercises, it's easy to do bicycling or running or things like that. It's all lower body mainly. And so to have something upper body that really gets your heart going, and also as well, it's like, think about it, when you get your arms moving in an exercise, it's going to get your heart rate up way higher than just the legs, right? So it's so great for that. It's so great for increasing bone density. I'll give you an example. My wife, who fought about 22 fights, her bone density, even for someone that doesn't do any weight training anymore, or anything like that, is so high. And mine is as well. And it's from that contact style of sport of hitting a bag and things like that, because it really makes your bones dense and helps you build up that strength and everything else, as well as the endurance and then balance and things like that of that nature. And then of course, if you're actually learning the actual techniques and whatnot, which you don't always learn in a boxing style class necessarily, but you're also building up, some type of awareness, or at least some ability to produce more force with a punch and things like that. Because even if you're 130 pounds, it's like, heck, when I boxed, I got dropped twice. And both times were from lighter people, right? One
Really?
guy
Okay.
was 140 something and I was 160 something, and the other guy was like 130. And so it's like, dude, and I sparred the two-time national heavyweight champion of Mexico. So he's like 200 pounds plus. He never dropped me. But these other little guys, you know, I got dropped twice.
Really?
Yeah. So that's the beautiful thing about it. And so situational awareness, things like that. The downside to it, is there a downside to it? I don't know. The downside to it really is that depending on where you go, right? And this is kind of me throwing sort of the people in my industry under the bus, but is what it is that sometimes if you walk into a more legitimate boxing gym where they are teaching things, sometimes there's a little bit of that bro mentality, right?
Gotcha.
And like you have with sports. And, you know, let's face it, women boxing did not get into the Olympics until 2012.
Mm,
Okay. So
something I didn't know.
yeah. And so it's been slow. Like Ring Magazine, you know what Ring Magazine is,
I've heard
Christian?
of it. Mm,
Yeah, so it's called the Bible of boxing, right? I
okay.
remember reading back in 2010 in Ring Magazine, they're like, women's boxing is barbaric, you know, and
Mm,
it's just like, that's weird. Like,
right.
it's a sport. It's like anything else.
Right.
So the downside maybe is that if you don't go into the right type of facility, like the ones that we try to that we do our best to ensure that we produce, you know, you may not feel like you fit as a lady,
I got you.
and that's just one of the unfortunate things of it. But that's something that our brand is looking to change in terms of legitimate. Now you can go to a women's exercise boxing class and be totally accepted, but you're not going to learn very much. So it's that fine line in between.
I got you. I got you. So same question about the men. What are the pros
Yeah.
and cons of boxing for men?
Yeah. So and they're actually very similar. The big pro is that, let's face it, again, another stereotype. Guys don't like to do cardio. Guys don't like to freaking, you know, be on a elliptical or treadmill or whatever for, you know, 30 minutes, 40 minutes at a time, things
Gotcha.
like that. They want to put on heavy weights on the bar and bench it, and that's about it.
Yeah. You know what? And tell you the truth, I've been working with one of my clients about that. And the importance of, if you want to lift heavy, your heart and your breathing has to be right too. You know what I mean? So how do
Right.
you improve that? What you just said, the big C word, cardio.
Right. And also right on that note, such a beautiful point there, Christian. So when I went from boxing directly to heavy lifting, you know what I had that allowed me to gain so much muscle so fast is because my body was so in such good condition that my recovery from workout to workout was
Yeah.
so quick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Versus before I started boxing, I would try to lift weights, and man, my recovery was so long because as your body gets in better aerobic condition, you can export that metabolic byproduct like lactic acid, things like that, and
Right.
man, you can recover so much faster. So yeah, great point.
Right. So why is good form important even if you aren't training to fight?
Right, 100%. And then also touching on that note as well, man, it's like guys have a funny thing, and it's typically guys, right? And again, it's funny. I was talking about this last night with somebody, but we all have that thing as a guy where, and I had it big time. We're like, man, if it came down to it, I could handle myself. Or if I got mad enough, I could handle myself.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe you can, but probably you can't, because it's just like, if I was like, man, if I was mad enough, I could beat Michael Jordan at basketball. It's like, doesn't make any sense. And the
Yeah.
same thing applies to fighting.
Right.
Same thing. And or like, man, if I caught him, it's like, come on. So it's something that it's a beautiful experience with boxing and combat sports, is that you don't even know what you don't know. So therefore, when you finally break yourself down and you go in there and you maybe actually get to experience a sparring situation, even in a controlled fashion, and go against someone that's a little bit better than you, that's even smaller than you, like I alluded to earlier, and have them just dominate you and realize, oh, wow, like I actually don't have what I think I have. And that's a beautiful moment for a man, because you need to be in reality as a man. You don't need to think you're more than what you actually are.
Right.
And because you'll make the wrong assumptions in situations. And so it was a beautiful experience having that for myself. And I see that as a beautiful builder, because then you break yourself down and you build yourself up. And again, in the right type of place and facility, you're able to do that. And then the downside, I would say, is similar to kind of that note, is that, you know, let's face it, boxing is called the red light district of sports for a reason, right? It's a sport that's had a lot of corruption. It draws two types of people, right? It draws people that want to challenge themselves, improve themselves, or are fighting their way out of a tough situation, whether it's mentally, emotionally, or with me physically, or maybe financially, right? Then it attracts another type of person. And this is a small group of people in this type of industry, but it's a group that's there. And that's the people that don't really care about other people very much. They like the hurt business, right? They like that aspect. So whether they exploit it through the coach aspect or promoter aspect, or even the fighter aspect, they like the hurt, and they like literally causing pain to other people. And so it's a small minority, but they're there as well. And when you go to a place where maybe that's a little bit too much, man, you go in there as a guy, especially if you're a bigger guy, and some other big guys like, oh, fresh meat, and go in there, they don't take care of you, and they look to prove a point. Like, I give you one example, and he's a good guy, he's not a bad guy, but I would never, if he had a gym, he did have a gym, I would never tell anyone to go there, because the second he sees someone come in over 180, right, he's like, oh, let's just spar. I'm gonna go easy on you, just body shots. And every time, Christian, he breaks somebody's rib. Every time he breaks a rib. And it's like,
Goodness
that's
gracious.
no good.
Yeah.
Man.
That's not very encouraging to come back for the next session.
No.
But like you said, he's in the mentality of the hurt business.
Right.
He's in the mentality of the hurt business. And who knows, somebody's going to come in there with the same energy and probably more bone density, like you said, maybe a little bit lighter, and drop them.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like, the hurt business versus the help business, right?
Yeah.
And like, you got into training people and coach people for the help, and that's what drew me to it, because I want to give people the same. And same thing with my father, because my father, he grew up, and he's one of two boys, and his older brother was always the one they said, oh, he's the smart one. He's the one that goes to college, and they literally paid for his older brother to go to college, bought him a car. Didn't do that for little Donnie. And so my father was just, felt like he was nothing. And so he wanted to become something. So he got into wrestling a little bit in high school, and then he got into boxing. And he told me a story about one of his first fights as an amateur. Two things. One is, I think it was before his first fight, his father came up to him and said, hey, Donnie. And he didn't say good luck or anything. He said, hey, Donnie, don't worry. I have the number to the hospital. It's like, you don't want to hear that going into your first fight.
Encouraging, ain't it? That's
right?
Encouraging, ain't it? Right.
And then this is one of the moments in his life that he told me where everything switched. Two moments come to mind, but the one that relates to this is that one of the big fights he had as an amateur in Chicago, he got dropped, and he was, he remembers it with his gloves on the canvas. They're giving him the count. He looks over at his father, who's sitting kind of ringside, and his father's motioning for him to stay down. Just stay down, Donnie. Stay down, Donnie, because his father is not a bad guy, but his ideal of what Donnie's success in life would be working at the post office. Like he said, that's what you need to do. That's the highest expectation you need to have for yourself. And so he looked at himself. He looked at his father, and he said, I don't want to be like you. And I'm going to be more than what you think I can be. And that is what motivated him to stand back up, finish the fight, overcome those fears. And so all those lessons and experiences he had, that's what he loved instilling in other people. And that's what I love as well.
Awesome story. That's very awesome. When you're down and somebody just not believing you, and that just fuels you even more, even more. Next question. How did you become a cornerman, or how do you become a cornerman?
That's great.
And these questions are from people in my Facebook group, Success Fitness Family. I'm like, hey, I'm interviewing Coach Keith. What questions do you have? Because I know zero about all of this. I might watch a little bit of boxing here and there, but as far as you're educating me right now, even from the Ring magazine to Women's Olympics, I'm like, oh, okay. And so these are questions right from the group. And the question is, how did you become a cornerman? I don't even know what that is. So you can I'm like, what?
I love your honesty. Well, yeah. So, and that's one thing, like rolling right into that question, is that, so as a fighter, you have to have absolute belief in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, it doesn't matter how much other people believe in you. And that's something I have to sometimes occasionally help people understand. And it's true with life too. It's like, it doesn't matter how much your mom, your dad believe in you. You have to believe in you. And so same thing as a coach, man. It's like your coach or your corner man, it doesn't matter how much they think you're going to be world champion or whatever. You have to actually believe that. Okay. And so what is a corner man? That's the person in the corner with you, right? That not only gives you water and things like that, but also gives you that instruction that you need to make an adjustment. So I'll give you an example. A lot of times in amateur fighting is 3 rounds. All right. So that first round, sometimes things might not go the way you want them to go. And there might be, because it's like, you don't know who you fight. It's not like, oh man, who am I fighting? You don't know till you freaking go up there and they're across the ring from you. So that first round, it's like, you go out there, you do what you want to do. You need to do, but there may be some adjustments. So sometimes you'll lose the first round. But what's really important, and that's where the Cornerman comes in, and the coach in the corner, is to see what adjustments need to happen, decide out of all the data coming in, what's the one thing we need to do or two things we need to do to make it better the next round, and then help you implement that in the next round. Gotcha. And then aside from that, also Cornerman can serve as a cut man. In a pro fight, you have like about 3 people in the corner. So you have the chief second, and then you have like kind of the general helper, and then you have a cut man. Cut man in a pro fight, if you get a cut over your eye or something like that and it bleeds into your eye, they'll stop the fight because you need to have both eyes in order to see depth, right?
Gotcha.
So that's a whole nother art, which is something that I've done. My father was also a cut man. My wife has been a cut woman for pro fights. Okay. And so that's a whole nother art. But how do you become one? Like I mentioned when you put it in the notes, as a pro, you pay $25 depending what commission you're in, and now you're a cornerman. You don't need any experience. Wow. And that's how unregulated the sport is.
Oh, wow.
Right. So that's why on the low level pro scene, if you ever go to a low level pro fight, you'll see some craziness.
Yeah, I got
you. Some slop. You'll see some good. You'll see some bad.
I got you.
And then as an amateur, you gotta basically pass a basic test, a very basic test. It's too basic, honestly. And then you pay your fee to be licensed, and that's it. But how do you become a good one? Again, it goes back to that mentoring thing. So like I spent so much time mentoring under my father, him teaching me how to be a coach, how to coach in the gym, how to coach in a fight, and then also how to be a corner man. Because I'll tell you, Christian, there's some coaches that they don't even know how to wrap someone's hands for a pro fight. And it's like, I've seen it too much where it's like, we'll be in like Maryland or somewhere like that for a pro fight. And this coach is like, hey, can you wrap my guy's hand? It's like, dude, you're a pro coach. Like, you can't wrap someone's hand. Or you'll see some wrap jobs that are just disastrous, and they're going to hurt the guy more than they're going to help him.
I got you. Hitting on the statement you said about, you can go to some of these kind of like low level fights, and it's kind of like anybody can be a, a cut man. And you mentioned it earlier about women may end up experiencing or getting a bad experience, kind of just going to just about any, I won't say any boxing gym, but any boxing gym. So how do you feel about so many people getting involved just with boxing? Because, I'm on, we're on social media. It's like, I'm seeing everybody. I wouldn't say everybody. I'm seeing a lot of people kind of get into boxing. And maybe it's because, I'm 40, right? I'll be 41 in December. And typical people that are on my timeline are like between like 35 and 55. And kind of like what you were saying earlier, you kind of go through the phase where it's like, okay, I'm lifting. And now I kind of want to do something else. And I'm starting to see more of that. I'm starting to see that shift in real time, where it's not so many people working out as far as lifting weights. Let me correct myself, as far as lifting weights from that standpoint. And even some of the big bodybuilders and stuff, I'm starting to see them get into boxing. So how do you feel about just all that? Do you think it's a fad, or do you really think that is people just entering another phase of their life?
So one thing, I'm 35, you said 40, 41.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember a little bit of it. I know more of it than I have seen it, but think about what was really big in the 80s and the 90s, right? For general public, bodybuilding. It's huge.
True.
Right. And so we're kind of coming out of that era. And so now it's, obviously there's so many things out there, and so many different modalities for training, but we're coming out of that era. It's not so much, people don't even watch bodybuilding anymore, like pay attention to, I can't tell you who Mr. Olympia is.
Right.
So, I think that's what's caused the shift. And people, man, it's like this one gentleman that's on our team that has worked with a couple of big brands in the industry with, over 600 locations. He says that from what he's seen, that the fitness consumer is becoming more fickle, and they want to have more than just a workout. And so I think people are coming to something like boxing because they feel like they're going to get something more, and at the right place, they will get something more than just the exercise portion, right? They'll actually learn something and get that entertainment, but also that personal growth. Because again, to me, it's all about personal growth, man. Who are you becoming in the process
Right.
versus, just
Right.
the pure fitness aspect. And then also too, what's funny? Let's talk about what used to be the thing that you didn't want to bring up if you were in boxing, and that's MMA. But it's done an interesting thing. MMA, which I have massive respect for as a sport, and I've worked with many MMA fighters with their stand-up, and it's a great sport. But MMA, which is obviously the main one that you know of as far as promotions is UFC, has done an interesting thing, which I think has led your peer group and my peer group to feel like boxing is more accessible, even in terms of like actually even doing like some sparring or something like that. Is now you have this thing called MMA, which is so extreme because that's how it was marketed, right, to make it exciting, that it's like now boxing is like, hey, that's tame. Where
Right.
it used to be,
Right.
boxing was like Mike Tyson and biting people's ears off. That's extreme.
Yeah. Right.
Don't do
Right.
that.
Right. 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 Yeah. And you put it so plainly. And it's again, power of marketing and
Right.
business is that I remember when, boxing was such a marketed as such a
Right.
brute force. And then
Right.
that kind of, faded out. And then it comes MMA, brute, brute, brute. Now you're starting to see, even when it's the highlights, it's more punching versus kicking and grappling and you know what I mean, things like that. And it never added up to me until you just said it, right there, right there. Yeah. So yeah, that's why, that was a question that I wanted to know. I'm like, how do you feel about that? Because
Yeah.
I personally just see just so many people doing it, and you hate to be judgmental from a voyeur standpoint, but it's like, are you really that into it? Are you avoiding lifting weights? But at the same time, like you said, there's different modalities. They want, different things. So, I'm just
Right.
trying to just be more open to it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, great answer. With everything that you've been through from your Lyme disease to gaining and
Yeah.
losing weight to your neck being hurt to going into your own business, what major life lesson or lessons did you learn from all of that?
Well, I think one of those things that's very interesting that people say a lot, like you're talking about, listen to other podcasts, things like that, is they say you'll double down on your strengths, right? And there's truth to that. But that's if you're in a privileged position. But if you're in a position, and I mean, don't get me wrong, like there's plenty of people, I mean, heck, there's in the world, right? People that are even poor in America are way better off than the majority of people in the world, right? But the position myself being in of having no education really, I don't even know how to do like basic algebra or anything like that. And so all the education I have is self-education. And so the fact of the matter, I only had one route of success, and that was to take what I had in front of me, which was boxing. Initially, I wanted to be a champion. That didn't work out physically. And so then it's like, okay, well, now what do I do with it? And by the push of my father, he said, okay, coach now. Okay, that's my one route to succeed. I didn't have all these other options, and we get crushed by options, because in our modern society, there's so many different ways you think you can live your life or make money or whatever. And that's true, but you need to pick one, right? And commit yourself to it. Just like you need to pick a spouse, right? Pick a team, that type of thing. And so pick a cause to commit yourself to. And so that's one of the biggest things is that, the only reason I have anything to show for my life is because I picked something and I stuck with it long enough to actually get some type of reaction and some type of effect from it. Because so often, like I'm sure you see this, Christian, people start working out and they're like, man, where's the results? I was like,
Yeah.
well, they're coming, but it's unreasonable for you to think there's going to be results at this time.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
So
I got you. Tell everyone where they can reach you at: website, Instagram,
yeah,
everywhere where they can reach you for coaching,
thousand
websites, and
percent.
everything.
So yeah, as I know you used to follow me, Coach Keith on Instagram, Coach Keith Keppner on Instagram. We have a YouTube channel. We got about 3,500 subscribers on our boxing YouTube channel. Good place to look for some boxing technique, things like that. You can find me on LinkedIn, Keith Keppner, and also check out our website, www.keppnerboxing.com. And it's something that not only are locations that are in existence, which is about half a dozen, but also we're looking to grow this franchise as large as it is capable of growing, and to expand into many territories.
Alrighty, you heard it from Coach Keith today here on the Success Fitness Podcast. And if you found inspiration in today's episode and want to support this podcast, first, go follow Coach Keith. And on Instagram, go to his website and subscribe to his YouTube channel. But if you want to subscribe to the Success Fitness Podcast, then sign up via my newsletter, the Success Fitness newsletter. You can click the link that will be in the description box below, and you will instantly receive a 10% discount code that can be applied to my new e-cookbook, What to Meal Prep for Beginners. It includes 3 high-protein meals for 3 recipes for 1 high-protein meal under 600 calories, step-by-step written instructions, and also video tutorials. And it also comes with a free ebook. So if you found inspiration in today's episode and want to support just one way, click the link in the description box below, sign up to the Success Fitness Podcast newsletter, and you will be notified when new episodes of the Success Fitness Podcast will publish, and then access to my private support community on Facebook. Sign up with the link in the description. And I want to thank Coach Keith Keppner for appearing on the Success Fitness Podcast. And thank you for listening to the Success Fitness Podcast. And until the next episode, Success Fitness is the mindset. And remember, success is golden. #more weight. Peace out.